All right, we'll get rolling. Welcome back. All right, so I messed up last week. Today is the last day of elements. And we'll talk about space. And I'll show you some examples beyond the space lecture, just because they're cool. And it kind of leads into like using space and negative space and kind of it's like the best of the best with logos and starting to get you to look at things differently in the world. So as designers, so let's get started. Bring this into here. It is our final. Oh, no. Space. Let's talk about space. All right. So when we're talking about space in the design, there's a bunch of ways to look at it. It's not just like necessarily like, oh, the page is a space and I'm going to put stuff in the space on the page. I'm going to fill the space with text. No, that's not what we really mean. We're more or less thinking about it as a part of the design, as a integrated piece. Maybe if I zoom back out on this, I look at this design. It has three spaces to me. There's space, space one, information, space two, imagery, space three, like just like the extraneous information. So when I design this multi-page document, I'm designing with three spaces in mind, and that's one way to think about it. If we're talking about filling the page, filling the space on a page, but how are we going to do that? So that's one way to think about it. Like, and the easiest way is like, oh, I have an assignment. I got to fill the space. So that's what we do. Now there's positive and negative space. Positive is the area occupied. Negative is the unoccupied. Here's the weird part. You can flip those in reference to what your mind may think. If we think of an occupied area as the black, let's draw. Let's have some fun. Great. So if we're just like drawing, and I draw, oh, I have the wrong brush. Sorry, it's still the wrong brush. So if I draw like a dot, we think of that as a positive space because to us, the white is negative and the black is positive. But then if you just simply, if I do a reverse, like, is that a dot or a hole? How do we think about that white space there now? Is that a negative? Is it a positive? Is that on top of it? So it can be flipped around when you talk about positive and negative space. The fun part here is those extra things I'm going to show you at after we look at my examples. I'm going to show you logo examples, and some have hidden things in them. Some have little items that you may not have noticed. We won't do 1,000 of them, but we'll do some. It's kind of cool. So that works, in that idea of positive and negative space. What is coming for, like, what do you want people to notice first is probably the positive space, and what do you want to set back is the negative space. And so maybe on here, this example is, this is positive, this is negative. I want people to see this, but I want this to be pushed back in the background. And so that's why I did it the way I did it. Creating depth is how we play with space. So in your assignment, you're going to be creating depth. You're going to be messing around with this kind of illusion here of foreground, middle ground, and background. And how do you play with those? How do you get those items to feel that certain way? You have to remember, we're faking people out. When we draw a square, that's just a square. But if I do this, is one in front of the other or not? Like, not really. No, it's just some lines, but the way I did that makes it seem like there's space. Foreground, middle ground, background, and then you can color that one in. But it's just creating illusion. And there's many tricks, and that's just one of them to help show, and kind of create that idea of foreground, middle ground, background when it comes to working in the design. Another way we can work with that space and work with design elements and working with the space is their relationship to each other, proximity. There is something that as you carry on and you have me as an instructor further on, that I will go crazy about. It's like the number one thing is margins and creating proximity between elements in your design. And it's the arrangement in the relationship of those to each other. There's a introductory problem sometimes with students, and we tend to so say I have something here. The tendency is to put the other item right next to it. And I'm not sure why we do that instead of saying here's an item, and then I'm going to give that item some space. I call it breathing room. So this area is the space in between. And if it's too tight, we have a feeling of it makes us feel uncomfortable, especially if it's text right butted up against something. You get a feeling of unease. The piece doesn't feel right, is what it's called. But when you gap it and have a spatial relationship in there, there's breathing room. I call it breathing room. A lot of the times when I get to the point of it's personal space. How close do you like people being to your face when they're talking to you? Do you want them really up close? You want to feel their breath on your face when they're talking to you? Most likely not, unless you like that, or whatever. But most likely you want to be able to see them. You want some personal space, back off. That's a lot of times how the design elements need to work with each other too, is give each one its space, have it back off. There's a reason why you do certain things. But then, like I just showed with overlap, that's something different, because we want to show they're not together. I'm faking you out and by overlapping, you now get a sense of not flat spatial relationship, but maybe a sense of a 3D spatial relationship within the design. Balance and composition. Proper distribution of positive and negative space contributes to visual balance. That's what I got trying to go on here. How is this piece balanced? We have really dark, heavy object here and lighter here. The relationship is broken up. It's actually in 3. It's 1, 2. I had the first 3, but it's 1, 2, and 3. And visually, these 2 equal this heavier area. And that's why it works the way it does. So it's the visual balance of the 2. If this is a negative space and these are the positive, that's how the 3 work together. It's weighted. This is heavy. It visually takes up, quote unquote, more room. So then that's why I have then 2 columns of text instead of the reverse of that, which would be if I did black background, white text in a white area. This area here would be too overwhelming compared to just this small area with some images. Mood and atmosphere, open versus closed space. It just helps us to design with more negative space. More open space feels open and airy. If you get too much stuff going on in a design, you're jamming it in, it feels jammed in. It feels like, a closet with too much crap in it. And we like to do that. you know, we want like, oh, I want to add this, I want to add that, I'm going to add this, and it's like, oh God, you added too much. It feels like, you know, I can't concentrate when I look at the piece. So we have to think about that. How do we balance? What's the perfect amount of stuff? Isolation. Using negative space strategically can isolate or emphasize. It's right here in this piece. They did it just like, that's what we're talking about. It's like we have this one area and we just put on this one little part in there, and it really just sets it off differently than it does in all the other places. I mean, space is manipulated to create effective layouts and advertising. Yeah, that's what we're talking about overall. In terms of perspective, if you want to, you know, get into perspective and figure that out, that's a whole nother like genre, but it takes us more into drawing than it does graphic design. But we're talking about linear perspective, aerial perspective. The linear is the, you know, techniques of converging lines in space. We do it just simply this, you know, like things going back. Here's the train tracks. You know, like it's going away from me. This is, and things get taller as they get closer. So that's the linear perspective. The other one, the aerial perspective, is use of color to simulate atmospheric conditions. It's like as things get further away, they get hazier and lighter. It's just like looking out the window and kind of seeing what's out the window. It's what I did for the color, the monochromatic value composition when I did the mountains, and then I had a lighter background, and then you can kind of push and pull with that. And that's a great example right there. Then dealing with space in the true way that you can deal with space is, this is getting bigger and bigger, and I love it, is interactive or experiential design. That's actually where I came from. I worked at a company and I designed that kind of stuff. I designed buildings, events, like full on like trucks you'd walk into. The space was designed. And so I wasn't just simply designing like a poster, but I was designing the space you walked into. And it was pretty cool. I did, you know, booths at conventions and all that kind of stuff. So interactive spaces as a whole, once you get one done, you can move into the other. So we talked about this positive, negative space, and this is a great little piece right here. And I get it. It's just kind of trickery on the mind. In here, we did it in reverse, probably that we would normally do, but it really helps with this text, similar to what I did. They're doing the, you know, one third, and bringing approximately, you know, but bringing out the idea of the city, and the city's the positive. It's white on the black background. It's not necessarily making us think of a night scene, but we get the sense of atmosphere from it. And the fun part is, like, again, we get this, it's just a silhouette of a city on a background, you know, evokes so much, and be like, oh yeah, that's the city, blah, blah, blah. If you do the skyline right, you know what city it is. And there's depth here. This is the sky, this is the city, and then this is the foreground. Everything, there's only two colors in here, but we can create a lot of different variable in space from very little. So it doesn't always have to be this monumental piece like Tintin over here, where it's like all bells and whistles. Like we've got atmosphere going into the sun. We got this guy, he's walking forward with the shadow coming toward us on a globe that's like, you know, in perspective, and like it's extreme perspective, and everything like 3D, and you just want to like go into that space. This is like kind of like the all out version. I don't need all that stuff. I can do it with black and white and kind of still get people to think like, this is a sky, this is a city, this is the foreground, like a torn piece of paper, or, you know, we gotta wow them, make it big, make it bright. You know, that's what that is when it comes to movies. These days, these next two images I'll show you, so much easier to start doing some of this work. We don't fully kind of teach 3D design. It is a whole extra step and process in the design. If you choose to do it off, you know, on your own, like go for it, learn it, love it. It's great. I do know how to do it. It's just because I had to learn it at my previous job, and I loved it, and I still use it to this day. I can, you know, get around what I need to do to get it to look convincing when I need to do it. But this is just like set up like these like icy letters, and it's so great on this like concrete. You got, you know, contrast. We talk about contrasting all these different elements in the design. Is like hard ice, but it's soft, you know, it's like melting ice, but if it falls over on the cement, it could smash. And so many different feelings come up, you know, within just kind of looking at this single piece. And it's got such a, you know, deep space all the way back. I kind of wish I knew where these were. But it's just all these angles and cement and the shadows really like kind of trick us in the, like how depth, you know, how much depth is in that space. This is another one where if you took it out, I wonder if you just like blocked out everything but the full black and then just did black and white, you would probably still have some sense of like that feeling of deep shadows and the way that they're moved around and all that stuff. So cool. Here's another fun one. Like this idea, I love that. It's great. This is a question. This comes up all the time. You know, when you get into design, people are like, I like this one person's design. Can you do mine like theirs? And you're like, no. But the extra sense of space in here, and I don't know why they didn't do MELT. They have it starting with the M. They could have done an E. Oh, there's an M, E, L, and a T. They broke it up, but they have 4 of these letters that are like seemingly falling forward, like they're falling off the poster to add to that sense of, no, the N is too, but to add to that sense of like, I'm trying to think of like the proper, like it's about to fall, like, oh my gosh, it's about to fall down. So it's, you know, it's fun in more than one way. It's a different way to look at or even design a poster instead of just like typing it out. But we're like, we're going to make the letters 3D. And then somebody said, let's go the extra step. And I want some to make it look like they're actually falling from that area too. And it's just a lot more fun. Transference of positive and negative space here with the black swan. Put that in the middle. Positive, negative, or positive and negative. You know, we got feathers falling in the front. Then the black swan is next, and it's pointing down at the text, but the text is in front of the swan. And then we have, you know, the white background of the person. And I love this, like this part here of the neck, that they did it with enough texture that it almost brings across a wing feeling here. So that shape could be determined as a wing as well. So it's playing off the swan and a wing and a person and the falling feathers. And it's just pushing, it's all flat design, but it's pushing around in so many different spaces and elements. It's just, all this stuff is just like kind of really great. And like when you think about like, oh, I'm going to do this, and then I want this to happen, and then I want this to happen. You're telling a story. We're storytellers. Like that's the new big thing they talk about when you talk about graphic design or you hear about graphic design conferences. And, you know, the big thing to talk about is storytelling. We're visual storytellers, and we're trying to tell a story to engage a consumer into being interested in what we're trying to get them to consume, be it a movie, be it Melt, whatever they do, and it's, video, or go to this movie or go to this conference. That's what we're trying to do, is tell a story. I know by looking at this conference, it's in this city and it's on Redo, it's a funny mix. So that's what it's all about. So let me, in the storytelling, so let me show you some fun positive negatives and maybe some things you've seen or haven't seen. I'm going to jump around between two things. The first one is the one, of course, in the middle here. I'll come back to that one. I'll come back to a couple. FedEx, we all see it all the time, driving around the streets. FedEx is always moving forward, known by this arrow right here in the FedEx logo. There's purposely done. There's an arrow right there. Kind of once you see it, you can't unsee it. I always see the arrow now, no matter what. That's great use of that positive negative idea. I don't know if anybody's ever eaten a Toblerone. Oh, this is kind of blurring out. I don't know if I can make it bigger. There's a bear in the logo. There's a bear in the mountain. Right there. That's a fun one. Let's see. That's not one. Oh, this is good. It's Sun Microsystems. But when we read it, if you look at this one, it's S, see the S, U-N, but they all combine. The positive and negative of this, is it an S or is it U and N? Just keeps flipping back and forth as you go around it. It's a brilliant logo right there. I hope everybody's seen this little thing, the people holding a chip above the salsa and Tostitos, the two T's turned into people, working with that space, positive and negative. What are we trying to emphasize and de-emphasize? Yeah, we know the G is a smiley face there for goodwill. If you didn't know that, that's what that is. The G is like a half of a face, half a smiley face. Of course, Tour de France. It's a guy riding a bike, front wheel, seat back wheel. This is London Symphony Orchestra, but it's supposed to be like the conductor. It's the conductor. Here's his head and the baton, and he's waving his arms. London Symphony Orchestra. So it's that idea, like that spatial relationship. Oh, because this one, I forgot about this one, Wendy's. And then here, it's mom. It's supposed to be like mom's food. It's supposed to be an M, O, and an M in her little dress there. The other one, Beats by Dre. Beats. This is supposed to symbolize a head wearing headphones. That's what that symbol is. They put a little nose on it. They just took the nose off, little round head. And then, well, we all know about the peacock. If you didn't know that there was a peacock in NBC Peacock, that's what that is. And then the last two. Amazon. This one isn't about positive and negative space, but Amazon, it's everything from A to Z. So that's why the arrow is pointing from A to Z. And then it's also a smiley face. And the last one, Baskin Robbins has 31 flavors. So the B and the R are also the 3 and the 1. Oh, I do like the Roxy logo. The Quicksilver logo is this waveform with the mountain, so surf and snow. And then they reversed it, which makes the hands making that heart symbol. That's a great one, dealing with the positive and negatives also. All right, that's all I'll show you for that. Let's look at the project. And on Thursday, I'll talk about the design practice. All right. just 3 versions of spatial relationships. Oh my God. I'm sorry. I want, just repeat what I have here. So I have crowded and open. You can do whatever elements you want. Of course, when I build these, I try to go as generic as possible and leave more room open for you students to go crazy and be very creative. And so I didn't steal any ideas. But how would you show me a crowded and an open? How do you show me near and far and positive and negative? So I got to see if there's any restrictions on this. Yeah, no restrictions. So that's it. So how could you show? And as you can see, I'm using like the same elements. If I use dots up here, use dots down here. Can you get these to match then too? Like, can you get a near and a far to kind of be the same? Can you get your positive and negative to be the same? Lots of big dots all crowded in, very small dots spread out. What would be near? And then how could you do that as far, positive and negative? Any questions about space? And not that space. All right, cool. Yeah, so you know how to get a hold of me if you have questions, comments, or concerns. I'll talk about the design setup project. I'll run through that on Thursday for everybody. Again, thank you. People have done better this last week than they did the week before. Getting things lined up, looking right. And then next week, we don't talk about elements or principles. We get started on some other stuff. So things will get changing. We're halfway through the semester, getting there. So cool. You know how to get a hold of me. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, and I will talk to you on Thursday. All right, cool. Bye.